It's the end of the world as we know it. You are looking at one of the AGH's most popular and well-known works, the Bruegel-Bosch Bus by Canadian artist Kim Adams. If you've ever been to the gallery in person, you will no doubt have spent some time exploring the piece, discovering toys from your childhood, a crazy and fun assortment of characters, and perhaps some of the tiny figures who are going about their day among all of the spectacle. You may have seen it, but have you ever wondered what the Bruegel-Bosch Bus is really about? What inspired the artist to devote over 20 years to working on a single, albeit massive, artwork? And why toys? And who are these Bruegel and Bosch characters anyway? There are many different ways to interpret and understand the bus. It is a story that has evolved over many years with tons of tiny moments of storytelling. The bus has a huge cast of characters, and each has a role to play, though many times that role is only really known to the artist himself. Kim has shared many stories with us at the AGH and with visitors. He has, in return, heard a lot of other people's stories and ideas, and in a way that only Kim can do, he has now incorporated many of those other stories into his own grand narrative. But we'll get to that part a bit later. Let's start at the beginning, with a particular pair of artists and an odd title. For hundreds of years, artists, writers, philosophers, and prophets have been warning us about the end of the world, and of the dangers of our own destructive, self-serving choices. In the aftermath of the Dark Ages of the 14th century and into the early Renaissance, a period of Western art history that took place from about the 1400s to the 1600s in Europe, many people were sure that the end of the world was just around the corner. Having just lived through the Black Plague, which killed an estimated 75 to 200 million people, it's no wonder. The general population was not literate and so turned to art, to images, to learn. Artists created paintings that showed the doom that was coming in a wide array of forms, warning people of what would happen if they did not change their ways. If we begin our look at the bus with Bruegel and Bosch, the story lands us in the middle of a dire set of circumstances. This work is even more poignant today as we navigate through our own path of uncertainty. Pieter Bruegel and Hieronymus Bosch are two artists whose works show us the theme of people behaving badly, and two of their most famous paintings show us the consequences. In the book of Genesis, we find a story about a group of people, led by King Nimrod, who tried to build a tower that reached all the way to heaven. This is the Tower of Babel, a popular subject for artists, shown here in one of the most famous versions, painted in 1563. In the story, King Nimrod and his subjects were then punished by God for their bold and prideful action. Suddenly everyone spoke a different language that the others could not understand. Building stopped and the people were scattered across the earth. It is a story of warning of the consequences of pride and the futility of human action in the face of greater forces. Look at the back of the bus. You'll find skyscrapers reaching upwards towards the sky with all of the trappings of a modern city, emergency vehicles attending some kind of event, factories overtaking living spaces, and a garbage heap belching its refuse down the side of a mountain of disposable trash. The Tower of Babel is one of Bruegel's more well-known works, but it is a bit unusual for him, as the canvas is almost unpopulated. More often, he created paintings of huge but ordinary scenes, with every inch crammed full of people doing all sorts of things, such as we see here in a work titled Proverbs from 1559. The scene is filled with people captured in the middle of many different but ordinary activities, most of them completely unrelated to the main theme of the painting. This painting is a good example of Bruegel's recurrent themes of foolishness and the folly of humankind. We can see these influences in Adams' work too. Every surface is filled with activity, and if you look carefully, you'll see all sorts of tiny vignettes of everyday life and scenes of absurdity. Now, Pieter Bruegel was inspired by another artist, Hieronymus Bosch, through many of his paintings. Bosch was an early Netherlandish painter of the 15th century. His work is known for his use of fantastical imagery to illustrate moral and religious stories. Some works are downright creepy. The Garden of Earthly Delights from about 1504, shown here, is a huge painting in 3 parts, called a triptych. The panel on the left shows Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, goodness and moral behavior. In the middle is a wild landscape full of people and creatures doing as they please. humanity gone astray, and on the right is a frightening picture of hell, the consequences of poor choices. If you look carefully at the bus, especially at the front, you can see how it was inspired by the painting. You will notice all kinds of monsters and movie characters piled all over. Some are heroes, some are villains, and some are not so clear-cut. They interact with each other in unexpected ways and add an air of spectacle to a fun and potentially somber subject. Looking at the bus through the lens of Bruegel and Bosch can certainly give us a glimpse into some of the original impetus behind Kim Adams' artwork, though the path through the whole story is long and winding. Kim comes from a long line of artists warning of a looming apocalypse, but what is really interesting in this work is that he does it very much with a sense of humor, tongue firmly planted in cheek. He wants us to laugh and to think, and he cleverly pushes us in many different directions to accomplish his goal. For many years, we have seen a city with factories and debauchery overtaking any possible sense of a living community. There were no green spaces. The monsters and the traffic were taking over, and in one area, a large transport of animals headed to a slaughterhouse was caught up in an accident. More recently, though, Kim has started to suggest that things may still turn around. Small pockets of forest have begun peeking through one side, and in one of the more charming anecdotes that Kim has shared, he tells us that he sees some hope being manifested through more and more of the animals escaping their fate and making their way over to the green spaces. As he moves them from one area to the next, he is moving the story forward and offering us some hope too. Even when things seem bleak and desperate, art can show us a way through. And perhaps for today, we can let Kim give us a glimpse ahead.